Greetings from the rolling hills of Judea, just east of the famous East Jerusalem in what some like to call the West Bank. I have comfortably settled here, and therefore I am in the flesh. Pinch me, a real life West Bank settler. I'm fine with the title. It's the West Bank of the Jordan River, although we're a couple miles from the actual river, but close enough. It's a small country. So it's been a minute, and therefore I'm going to skip some of the stuff every day something happens here, but we're going to skip ahead to some of the more recent-ish stuff. Just about a week and a half ago was Jerusalem Day. Yay! That falls on the 28th of ER, and this year that fell out on Sunday, May 29th. And it celebrates the reconquering of Jerusalem by the Israeli army. For about 19 years, the Jews were not allowed to get to the old city of Jerusalem, is in quote unquote East Jerusalem. The famous Palestinian Muslim place where King David lived and built, and where the high priest did that sort of did sacrifices on behalf of the Jewish people up on the clearly not Jewish Temple Mount. That's exactly it. So, so we on the 29th, we celebrated its reconquering. I went on this, and unfortunately, it's not as celebrated as widely as you would think in Israel. It's considered more of a nationalistic day, but despite that, we had thousands of people. This is a scene from inside the old city where I was. The police had limited it to, at least reports beforehand, that they were going to limit it to 8,000 people going through Shar Shechem, which has three names. If you get on the light rail, it'll give you all three names. Damascus Gate, because it faces north towards Damascus. Shechem, Shar Shechem in Hebrew, because it faces also north towards Nablus, as it's called now, because Arabs cannot pronounce a P, and the Romans had given it the name Neapolis when they tried to erase all the Jewish names, and it was formerly known as Shechem, burial place of Joseph. And lastly, it's called Bab al-Amud, which is Arabic for the gate of the tower, because there used to be a tower there, and it's not there anymore. But in the time of the Romans, there was a tower, and the area has been a hotbed of fights between Arabs and Jews, mostly Arabs and the police, to be honest. A little bit of Arabs and Jews. And last year, the parade. So they say it's a parade. It's a little bit of a misnomer. It's a march. I think is a better thing. Is thousands and thousands of people start off walking, and we walk through the western half of Jerusalem, down King David Street, which is where I picked it up, over through the Mamilla Mall area into the around to the old city. Now, as I said, the police had said they were going to allow 8,000 people through the Shar Shechem, and then another 8,000 through Shar Yafo, the Jaffa Gate. Jaffa Gate faces west, and it's the most common gate for Jews to enter. It goes through the Armenian quarter, and then you're in the Jewish quarter. We went through the other way, just headed over there, and saw if we could make it. And when we got to there's a little area of steps where people hang out, which is a big cause of the problem, because especially during Ramadan, the Arabs would hang out there after prayers and then start getting into fights with the police. We went by the time reported in the day before that there had been attacks there. There had been conflicts with the police. There was a member of Knesset, Mary Regev, who had gone in, I believe, that way, and one of her security people was hit with the rock. But all that happened before we got there. By the time we got there, it was all Jewish. We were towards the not towards the beginning of the crowd coming into Shar Shechem. We got ahead of the quote unquote parade. Oh yeah, when I say it's not a parade, it's not organized. It's not like, oh, you have a float and then you have a marching band or whatever. It's just thousands of people walking along, and then it turns into a street fair. So they have certain stations where they set up a mobile. Like we saw the truck pull up and stop and start setting up for a band in one of the locations, and they'll stop. They'll set up they have a mobile platform. They'll start playing music, Jewish music, very happy music. People will sing and dance, and basically have a good time. It's very traditional music too. It's not it's not like the number one dance hit. It's very patriotic. Um, there also you will see different um, speeches by different political people. I don't really know. Um, So, and then along the sides, people set up stands and everything for the different parties, different organizations having to do with keeping Jerusalem in the hands of Israel, establishing settlements, that sort of thing. Come along to like I said, to Shar Shechem, everything is quiet. By the time we got there, everything, the whole pit is like a little amphitheater, like a semicircle of steps going down. So it's kind of like a impromptu amphitheater, and that was all. It was all quiet. You had at the top, you had Arab and foreign journalists standing around the edge, waiting for something to happen. Meanwhile, we just kind of marched in, and like I said, singing patriotic songs, different chants, mostly of Am Yisrael Chai, the nation of Israel lives. Um, when I went through, I mean, granted, I was with relatively the same people all the way through because it's very crowded. It's a little claustrophobic, but it's very, very crowded. Didn't hear anything of, kill the Arabs or anything like that. It was all just patriotic rah rah Israel. Um, you can see kind of from this picture how small this alley is, and just thousands and thousands of people trying to get through, and it's all steps going down. Eventually comes out at the Kotel. um, I want to take a minute and explain what's going on with Shar Shechem. And this area that we are went through is called the Muslim Quarter. Now, until 49, until the expulsion of the Jews from the old city, there wasn't a Muslim Quarter. Everything was mixed, and even today, there are a number of Jews who live there who've bought properties, or the properties are reverted to the original owners, and they're able to rent them out to Jews. It's a very, very small number, but that's also a very dangerous area on most days to go through. So, for Jerusalem Day, we're trying to make a statement that the whole of Jerusalem belongs to Israel, belongs to the Jewish people. Officially on Israel's books, spiritually, as part of our peoplehood, and you shouldn't think you're another country. And even though yes, there are Muslims there and they're legally entitled to live there, but you shouldn't think like, okay, but you're an independent people here. Like this is part of Israel, and that's what we're trying to express with this march. And one of the big points of the march, nobody disputes like going through, like I said, down King David Street, because it's all Jewish over there anyways. Because after 49, it was Jews who populated all that Israel area, because it was part of Israel at that point. Now that Jerusalem has been reunited, the point is to make sure that everyone in the world understands that it is going to stay united, and specifically, more than any other piece of property, the old city is and should be Israeli. We actually, at that point, I was with my son-in-law and daughter, and we broke to the right, away from the Kotel at the end, to go and visit the spot where his brother had been murdered in the old city, in the what's known as the Arab Shuk. Um, okay, so kudos to the Israeli government, and it's even a government that I don't support, they let everything go ahead. Not only that, but they had a record number of people, thousands of people going up to the Temple Mount itself, which is absolutely incredible. Last year, it had been canceled because of rocket attacks by Hamas. And uh, this, it was very tense leading up to it. They just finished, I think they just finished Ramadan when this happened. They were threatening left, right, and center, and in the end, Hamas didn't do a thing. Now, it could be that Israel just knew that, unlike last year, Hamas was just not in a position to do anything right now. There had been a very successful bombing of tunnels, killing a lot of Hamas leadership last year, and it could be that just they knew that they really couldn't do much this year. Um, I'm moving on from the Jerusalem Day. Um, the the big story. Well, we'll get to that really in a second because this leading up to this big story, is that a the government the coalition is kind of falling apart. It's been falling apart since it started because the government coalition is basically made up of people who don't like Netanyahu, don't like him enough to be able to go with to go with whoever was not Netanyahu. And it's interesting because you have a sitting prime minister who only has 6 seats. His party only has 6 seats out of 120. We've never usually the majority party either makes the government, and this is a parliamentary system. It's different than America because in America you really have just the two parties, and either one is in charge or the other one is in charge in any of the various parts of the government. But it doesn't work like that. Here they have to make deals in order to come up with a group that basically forms like we're sort of like the Republican Party, or we're sort of like the Democratic Party, and therefore we're going to be the majority as long as we can hold everybody together and keep them from running off. And people are starting to run off. But it was formed backed by an Arab party. So for the first time, you had an Arab party in the coalition. This has never happened before. And you had a party with almost no seats because you need 4 seats to be able to even sit in the Knesset. If you get you have votes that you wind up with less than 4 seats, even though you might have gotten 1, 2, or 3 seats. You cannot. There's a minimum threshold, and you don't get a spot in the Knesset. You have to have a minimum of 4 seats. This party only had I believe, I think maybe it started with 7, and then one of them said, "You're betraying your public," and left. For the most part, it's made up of Arabs. It's made up of very far left wing elements, including, which is going to be important in a minute, the Meretz Party, which is an anti-Israel left wing, mostly Jewish party. Um, uh, but they also have Arabs because it's all kumbaya. Like let's form a state that's like just whoever happens to live here, sort of thing. No purpose, no ideology behind it. But very left wing, very anything on the left. But the left wing makes an odd bed of fellows because you have LGBTQ and you have Arab nationalist. And when you put those two together, they don't jive because Arabs are religiously are usually very traditional. In particular, we're talking about Muslims and stuff. So it doesn't gel naturally. But you get a coalition of all the malcontents, basically, is what we have. And um, what's going to happen if the next time is you put those two things together, a party with almost no seats and an Arab party, put those two things together, an Arab party with almost no seats, becoming the prime minister, because they're the linchpin to keeping this thing together. So they say, okay, fine, you want to be the prime minister, you can be the prime minister. Basically, what he said. Like I said, it's usually either the party with the most votes, or it's the party like with the second most votes, and they're able to get okay, well, there's this other party that's kind of like us, but we didn't run together. So when we put those together, we get a lot of seats, and then we pull in a couple other small parties. Always they pull in a few small parties that whatever your issue is. Okay, we'll try and do something about your particular issue. Um, yeah, what's going to happen if we had an Arab prime minister? Nobody likes to think about it. Nobody likes to talk about it, but it's an interesting question. Moving on. So in Meretz there is an Arab woman named Zoabi, and if you've paid attention to Israeli politics for any length of time, you may say, "Wow, that name sounds familiar." That's because it's a big clan, and in Israel there are lots of Arab families that are big clans. And this woman, Hanin Zoabi, Yamach Shema, served as in the Knesset from 2009 to 2019 as part of Balad, which is an Arab party. That particular Arab party, Balad, which means country, meaning like let's have our own country, joined together with some other Arab parties and formed the Joint List. Um, and like I said, she was in the government until 2019. Apparently, she was convicted of forgery and fraud in 2021. That not a good lady, but she happened to have a cousin, Mohammed Zoabi, who had to go into hiding because he had expressed pro-Israel views. As an Israeli Arab who expressed pro-Zionistic views, and there are a few. There's a Youssef Haddad who's making a lot of news now. He travels around the world, it seems, and supports Israel. Comes out with an Israeli flag and confronts the BDS crowd, saying, "I'm an Israeli Arab and I don't want what you're asking for." Um, he went into hiding, and then eventually had to flee to the United States. And then Our Lady of the Moment, Roida, I'm hoping pronouncing that close to correct, Zoabi. So Raida Zoabi decides, you know what, this coalition is hanging together by a thread. There's 59, I believe there's 60 seats right now in favor of the coalition, which means there are 60 seats altogether opposed to the coalition. Now, not all of that is right wing or pro Netanyahu. There's the Joint List Party, of which her cousin, some sort of relative, was a party to, but Al-Qaeda is part of the left wing Meretz Party, which is mostly Jewish, and Jewish, very opposed to anything religious. Um, and she decided to leave the coalition. Why? She said, well, because of the Temple Mount and the occupation and everything, the whenever Jews go up on the Temple Mount just to walk around the edges, it's termed as an invasion of Al-Aqsa by all of the Arab media. We live next to Jordan, and we pick up Jordan radio, which actually is like one of the best music stations. Plug again. I've mentioned them before. Great station, Bliss. But their Blisscast is like the king said this today, the king said that today, and Israel did something horrible. And it's always an invasion, trampling of Al-Aqsa, everything. Meanwhile, the Hamas people are in there with shoes on in their own mosque. There was video clips of the Israeli police the women putting on skirts, and everyone taking off their shoes and carrying their shoes into the mosque because they had to go in and inspect and try and confront what was happening. And there are other pictures of the Israeli police went in there and they had all these guys in their shoes, laying down on the ground, being arrested. There were video clips of them playing soccer in there inside the mosque, inside the Al Aqsa Mosque. In any case, so she decided to leave the coalition and said, "Oh, this is over, occupation and whatever." Um, and then she decided to come back. Well, the coalition put out that they said she didn't come back for anything new. She didn't get any new money and everything. Everything was just they were going to distribute to the Arab towns what they had already promised them, and they were just going to start doing it instead of stalling. Okay, you could believe that. I don't know how that happens, but she then is and this week there has been the situation's come to a head over a law which is the emergency Judea and Samaria law. Okay, the emergency is that for 55 years Israel can't get its act together and say, "Oh, we're going to do one thing or the other with the territories." If they had done it, if they'd done it with anything that they've done it with has worked out fine, right? Jerusalem they declared part of Israel. Yes, people complain about it, but like practically speaking, makes very little difference. The Golan Heights, Israel and officially quote unquote annexed. Some like to say applied sovereignty, whatever. The question is really is on the Israeli books, is this counted as part of Israel or is this counted as part of the territories which then are under military rule? Even though Israel says they're not military occupied territories. International law basically says, yeah, Israel has every right to listen to uh, Kontrovich. I can't remember. I always mess up his name. It is not so clear. I mean, first of all, that there is such a thing as really international law, as opposed to who the one that wins sets the rules. But okay, the the in any case, um, so she and a party from the Ra'am faction, which is the Arab party we've been talking about, um, voted against this law. Now, what this law does is it says that even though we are not we are not applying Israeli sovereignty to the territories, even though we're treating them like they are, like they are occupied territories, even though they're not, um, that the Israeli citizens, and in particular that are living over there, um, have the same rights and the same, basically, most of the laws that apply in Israel itself. Now, the truth is that I don't understand this 100% because there are some laws which do not apply over here. One of them is the plastic bag law, and I don't know if they've changed this recently because it seems like most places are charging for them. But they passed a law in Israel saying that in order to get the plastic little bags in grocery stores, you have to pay for them. It's a very small amount. It's like a couple of cents or something like that, but you have to pay for them. And they did not get it approved by the military to apply to Judea and Samaria, and therefore it doesn't. So if I walk into my local grocery store, most of them will charge anyways because they just keep the money. Um, but they don't have to charge. Whereas if I go across into Jerusalem, which according to is not recognized but under international law. In fact, until Trump, Israel didn't. America did not recognize Western Jerusalem that had been around since 1949 as part of Jerusalem. So where the Knesset is, not part of Jerusalem. In fact, during the Obama administration, they went back and they had said, oh, Clinton meets with Netanyahu in Jerusalem, Israel. They went back and cleaned up all the mentions of Jerusalem, Israel, because they realized, oh, well, this doesn't fit like the U.S.'s line. If you were born in the hospital in Shaarei Tzedek, way in West Jerusalem, been around, like I said, since 1949, since the founding of the state, it's been part of Israel, not part of 1967. When Jerusalem was liberated in 1967, it only applied to the eastern side, to where the historical part of Jerusalem was. But there had already been a thriving western part of from before the state. As Jews moved out of the old city, they founded these different neighborhoods. If you've ever been to Mea Sharim, where the windmill is. Anyways, they started building this up, and by the time the Jaffa Street, where the central bus station is, all part of Western Jerusalem, not part, had been part of Israel since the beginning. if you're born in Shari Tzedek, which is over there, America would not list Israel as your birth as the country you were born in. They would just say Jerusalem. So in any case, they Jerusalem, um, uh, the Zoabi, getting back to Zoabi. Um, so she said, "Oh well, because of these attacks, because of the uh, the Jews going up on the Temple Mount, because of the quote unquote occupation, everything. She left. She came back, um, which what she came back for had nothing to do with what she said she left for, and now she voted against the Judea and Samaria law. And according to according to the Judea and Samaria law, no one knows what's going to happen if they don't pass it. So really, we would all be under military rule. What does that mean? It appears that the cops would have to like shut down and leave. Um, I mean, let them live here or whatever, but I'm saying like they couldn't function as a police force because it doesn't apply over here. I don't know what nobody knows. Nobody's tested this. Like, they just assumed, oh, this law will always pass, and they didn't want to do anything permanent because, like, oh, Chas v'shalom, like, we may need to change our mind sometime, so we're not going to make anything permanent. So they got themselves into this mess, and then Likud said we're going to take our ball and go home, and all the right wing parties, the right wing and religious parties followed them and said, okay, you know what? You guys have this coalition that supposedly can do great things, and you're so right wing you can have a Jerusalem Day parade, and it's the biggest one ever, and like everything was fine. Fine, go ahead, pass it. And of course, their own coalition members are like, we don't really like this law. We don't want anybody, we don't want Jews living in there. We want to have a mixed country of Israel, a country of all its citizens, where not only that, where the Arabs are free to come back, and at the same time have a separate country that is only for Arabs, and we kick all of the Jews out of. The cognitive dissonance here is often astounding. Um, this come to a head because the law expires at the end of the month, and it's likely to bring down the government because a lot of the government does not favor it. Bennett had hoped that because it's a right wing law, that the right wing and religious parties would just help him pass it, and then everything would be hunky dory. He said, there's no coalition and opposition when it comes to, like the security of the state of Israel. So therefore, Bibi and the different Orthodox parties, Smotrich and Ben Gvir and everything, you guys all have to vote for it. I'm like, not so much. What do I think is going to happen? This is obvious. This is totally obvious. And, I've seen like um, distressed messages on Facebook, like we're going to all not be Israeli citizens, and we're going to, I don't know who knows what. And what's going to happen is, first of all, a couple things. One is that if it goes under military rule, then whatever the military rules basically the law is the law. So if it's under military rule, the military can just turn around and say, you know what, cops, stay where you are. You know what, courts, like civil courts and stuff, stay where you are. Criminal courts, stay where you are. Keep enforcing the same laws. Right? We are making an edict that all the laws that used to apply still apply. We basically did the same thing when we conquered this land from Jordan. As we said, anything that was under Jordanian law before, whatever the Jordanian law said, that we're going to stick to. So what causes all the problem was Sheikh Jarrah instead of just saying, the hell with Jordan. And then on top of that, you got another 20 days to pass something. And so, of course, everybody's going to lead it right up to the last bit. So nothing's going to happen. You can take my word for it. You heard it here first. Nothing is going to happen. They're going to either pass it or find out another way to make the same thing apply that they didn't pass, and absolutely nothing will happen. All right. So, lighter side of the news. There are a few ironies going on through this whole thing. One is when Bennett was saying, "Oh, there's no coalition, there's no opposition when it comes to this, the security of the state of Israel." So, my buddy Ben Gvir, my favorite politician, he went and put forward a bill that to give the death penalty to terrorists. As some might know, there's only one case of a death penalty in Israel, and that applies to Nazi perpetrators, and was only ever carried out on Adolf Eichmann. So he puts forward this bill with Mai Golan, a very right wing legislator from the Likud, and it to give the death penalty to terrorists, and the the of course it got shot down. But in the past, Bennett had been had there's all these great quotes and stuff propaganda he's used, saying yes, we have to absolutely must have this. Lieberman from the Israel Beitenu party, which styled itself as right wing at least up until this election. Gidon Saar, who from the New Hope Party, which I almost voted for because of the Star Wars reference, but I'm really glad I didn't. So they had all been on record saying we absolutely need this thing, and then it comes to a vote, and of course, nah. Now it was embarrassing that the Likud also largely didn't show up for the vote. That nobody voted against it, but they largely did not show up for the vote. But the coalition all voted against it, and the you know the what happened? Well, we can't vote again. We can't vote for it because we can't give the death penalty to terrorists because we're in a coalition with an Arab party. Some of our best friends are terrorists. We can't do that. So that was kind of good. There's no opposition. There's no coalition. Ben Gvir kept spinning that back in the face. There's no opposition, no coalition. Why aren't you voting for this? You're criticizing us for not voting for the Judea and Samaria law. What happened to all your previous propaganda? Like I said, nobody expected that to pass. And speaking of Ben Gvir, so this has come up a few times in politics here, is that Ben Gvir is so right wing that when he went to join the army, they told him no. We want try to get the Arabs in here, try to get the Haredim in here, but like Ben Gvir, we don't want it. He's like, what happened? You talking is this a political army? And they're like, yes, it is. So Bennett says, you were you were in the army. Sorry, you were never in the army, and you don't know anything about the army. And this one reporter for Channel 14 was pointing out on the news, and I thought there was a great expression in Hebrew that he used. I don't know if it's a common one or not. So he was saying not only Bennett you're criticizing Ben Gvir over not going in the army. However, your coalition made up a bunch of people who not only did not serve in the army but actively opposed the army. He said, irony fell off the roof, and on its way down, before it hit the ground, it shot itself in the head. I just thought that was a great expression. I don't know if there's a common Israeli one or not. And lastly, the Bedouin complained, and this had a lot to do with the formation of this government. They say, you don't give us building permits. We have to build illegally because, you don't build up our cities. You don't give us permits to do anything. So, we see a piece of land, we just take it. What are we supposed to do? So Hamas in Gaza is running into the same damn problem. The Hamas, this video here is a raid where they were going in and silence this. So they went in and they kicked these Arabs out of their home, and the horrible occupation does, because they also don't get building permits. It's got nothing to do with the occupation. It's just that's our way of life. Okay, I want to thank everybody for joining me. I hope to do this much more often. And please subscribe, like this program, share it with your friends. Tell everybody hey, you want to know what's going on in Israel? You don't understand what they're talking about. Come see this channel. All right, everybody should have a Shabbat Shalom. Like I said, from the rolling hills of Judea.